Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures Podcast with Tommy, Mike, and Seth. Good morning,
Hello
gentlemen.
again. Hello again.
Good morning.
Good
Yeah.
Thursday.
Any fun ramp-up things? Anything that you guys want to kind of intro with today? We didn't cover this beforehand, but anything that hit your fancy? We did have the Power BI user group. Maybe we can actually a couple topics from there. We did have the Power BI user group for Milwaukee. If you're not involved with
In
that,
Chicago.
and Chicago, in Milwaukee and Chicago, we're a combined user group now. We do it stream. Our format is we stream the first hour of the content, just like the training part. Like there's an informative piece. I was going through the model and the thin reports. You can catch that on YouTube. I'll actually try and maybe Tommy or Seth, you guys can go snag the YouTube link or LinkedIn video feed for that. We can throw it in the chat window. Went well. When the demo didn't crash and burn, so I'm always thankful when a demo goes well and doesn't die. And then we had a really good session afterwards. So after the event is over, we do a thing called happy hour, where we open up a Teams meeting. Anyone who joins any of the live stream can join us on a video chat with Tommy, myself, and Seth. And you can listen to us argue in person with a Teams channel. So really good things. There's a lot of really interesting, let's call it developments that are happening across the Power BI community around using the scanner API and trying to get better documentation about your data models and how to consume them. So I'm going to push Tommy to finish your blog, Tommy. And I'm doing it, and I'm announcing it live now so Tommy can get it done. But apparently there's some
This
really...
is the third time now,
Tommy. You got to get it done. Spend some time, finish the scanner blog. But the scanner API is pretty cool. And a lot of people, I think, are finding a lot of advantage from it. So stay tuned. We're going to try and groom down some tools from the community and publish them and share them to everyone, so you can too could go find GitHub repos and other content around the scanner API. Your guys' thoughts? What do you think about the user group? Seth?
I think you shot yourself in the foot because it was probably one of your best demos in a while, and you were like, "I'm just winging this one together." You're like, well, gotta keep that stuff quiet, Mike.
True.
No, if you wanna catch up on thin reports and the modeling and how you set those structure, it was a good podcast, good pug groups.
Yep.
The scanner API stuff plus the after conversation and some of the lineups of people we got speaking at the next bugs. I'm super excited about. So the wider audience will definitely be able to.
That's a good point.
Catch some insights of what we initially talked about, because that's what we do, right?
Yes,
Also,
true.
there is bring and snag new ideas, and in this case, looks like we got some additional presenters to share some of the really cool ideas.
So
that's what we need.
I'll make sure I go through and try to, in the near term here, add all the YouTube events actually on scan, or basically schedule out everything and put them all on the schedule in the calendar so you can see them coming earlier. So I think we're already booked all the way through November now with all the people speakers.
A little pre-planning for our pug members.
That never happens.
Hey, just bank on the fact that we're going to have it whenever we notify it. Sometimes we're coming a little late.
Sometimes the day of.
Make sure to create the meetups this time a little early.
I do have to say, do you? It's fun to occasionally have moments where somebody comes and presents something that Power BI does that either you forgot because it's been there forever, or you never knew. Yeah. And I had one of those yesterday. I had one of our project managers who had been just hammering some of our embedded reports for some customers. And he's like, that problem we were having around sorting multiple columns. I'm like, yeah, like it's a problem. He's like, I figured out how you can do it. I'm like, what are you talking about? If you click on a column and sort it and hold shift and click on the another column, it will sort that one by retaining the first context of the other column. And it actually has, not kidding. And then it shows the black arrows of like
multiple
ascending, descending. And I like,
in the
he showed
view.
me, I'm like, no way. So I look at him, I'm like, I cannot recall ever having done this. And I was just like completely speechless.
Sounds like a blog.
Like, that's amazing.
Sounds like a little mini blog.
I never knew you could just hold shift. Like it's the shift or alt or left click, right click. It just shift,
works.
left click. It's just blown away.
I feel like you would want to have like a menu item that would pop up and kind of give you like a little bit more of an indicator, like you can do that kind of stuff. Like that's valuable.
So if you didn't know, folks,
that's a good.
You can multi-sort on columns.
Public service announcement.
Man,
you should click shift on the filter pane, see if it goes to the left-hand side.
Shut it, Tommy. Shut it. So filter pane was never there in 2007, Tommy.
I even reached out to Amanda too, so we're just waiting.
I know,
now.
And no one's responding to you because it wasn't there, so that's okay.
I've eaten my words before on this podcast. This one I am holding firm. By the way, what was the results of the poll?
We had some good polling results. So we threw out a little quick poll onto, so I threw it on the Power BI Tips LinkedIn channel. And this is actually another point we should probably talk about real briefly. We said, do you want to use the filter pane, the slicers, or do you use some sort of combination of both? The overwhelmingly, the answer was most people use a combination of both. But if you pick just between slicer and filter pane, almost everyone preferred slicers over filter pane.
I'm very surprised.
And almost like to the tune of like double the amount of votes came in for slicer versus filter pane. And I thought maybe I'm doing it wrong. Like at this point, but I was like, no, I'm not. It's got to be better experience. I like the filter pane better. So I think the filter pane with some improvements would even gain more momentum with some, being able to move to the right-hand side, left-hand side. So anyways.
Maybe people just don't know the customization that you can do in it now.
Maybe.
There's a lot of options.
Yeah, you can color it now.
Make that look
like
really
it's
sharp.
Part of the report.
Yeah.
Cool. And with that, let's get into today's topic. Today's topic is defining insights or creating insights from scratch. And really, this is around an article that came out from Microsoft. The article is titled "Metrics That Matter: How We Track Our Digital Transformation." And it's just kind of Microsoft kind of doing a little, hey, we're a big company too. We have lots of metrics. We had a hard time figuring out which ones to measure. And they are actually, if you read the article, their leadership team came to multiple business groups and said, we need about like 35 KPIs that tell us how the business is doing. And so it's a really, really good read. I really enjoyed it. Tommy, what were your thoughts? What were your initial thoughts on some of the article? And maybe give us a summarize of like, what are they doing here? And our topic today is kind of like, how do you create insights when there are none? How do you create requirements for a report when someone just comes to you with no requirements? And I think this is kind of addressing that topic. Maybe talk about that first.
Yeah. So I really love this topic because you said this before, Mike, where in the next 5 years, we're going to have more data than we've ever had.
Totally agree with that.
And at a company like Microsoft, you can only imagine how much data they have internally for their business.
Yes.
To say like the reporting things, but the article really focuses on, we have all this data, but trying to make sense of it in terms of what's actually decision making and what are things that we can actually report to the organization to say, what is the state of the union, so to speak? What is the state of the company? So it really starts with talking about how do they develop their main KPIs on a monthly basis that they're going to report up to the executive team.
Yep.
And then they're going to use for their departments. And is this investigation basically understand, okay, what is the executives looking for? Looking at what the departments had and then the process they created. But I think the bigger picture here is just because you track everything at your company and you have all of this data and you have a great model, that only gets you so far. And, and in terms of actually so far, to me personally, there's no success in just having data and having visuals. And I'm realizing this more and more. And the evolution of, we've talked about the maturity, the adoption roadmap.
Yep.
But I think just in general for us, even a single report, if you have no target or benchmark, it's just a report that's showing you data. What you did. Yeah. Just showing data.
Yep.
And it's not the point of, it's not the purpose of what a report's actually supposed to be.
Yep. And I'll give everyone like this is a very oversimplified view of this world, and probably there's a lot better examples than what I have here, but like just thinking at a high level, right? I own a business. There are people that do work. I expect to have a number of hours per person being accomplished per week kind of thing. So I have visuals that I've built where my goal is literally go to a bar chart and draw a line that says, this is your threshold. The expectation is here. And when I share this with people, they're like, wow, this is really clear. Like, because I have an objective. I have the whole purpose of the single visual is to drive a bit of action. And the article talks a lot about driving for action, or what can we get, what are we going to do what are these KPIs telling me that helps me get to a point where we're doing some actionable thing.
Mhm.
Seth, what do you think? Any of your thoughts around the article, stuff that popped out to you that you thought was relevant or wanted to talk about?
Yeah, lots.
Always. That's why I pinged you.
No, man, where to start with this one?
Yeah.
But I think many of us in general, or companies, right, don't sit down and do this exercise, right?
Yes.
And I think Tommy has a lot of insight to bring here as far as like the practical activities. But what literally, like, can you sit down and say, what are the goals of your company? Right? Is the company itself aligned towards a strategic direction? And do you have something that says good or bad, right? Are you doing well or are you not doing well? So this article kind of walks through that definition process, right?
Mhm.
Not in detail, but the things that I would not gloss over are the activities around discussing, where they started with 100 KPIs or 100 things that they would think would be the objectives or goals of a company, and distilling those, right? This is a process of brainstorming and coming up with ideas and refining until you're down to the things that really matter. Does it mean the other things don't matter? No, they just mean less,
Right.
right? Because
Mhm.
those are going to change based on what the company or your really large area goals are. And that refinement process is required, right, to actually get where we need to go. The other parts, I can dive in, like, to me, it
Yeah.
was just like, oh, okay, like, here's how we would go down and do all of these different things. And very enlightening article, because while even, in my position, in my particular job, like, this is the stuff that excites me, right?
Mhm.
This is the stuff that, like, once you can wrangle all of this wild information into a centralized place that aligns with these company goals, big things start happening, right? And I think the article points out some really interesting aspects of buy-in from different business units and
Mm.
things like, and the challenges around there. And maybe we explore that a little bit, because we have to change, kind of like, we being data people, we love data. Data drives a decision. It makes sense, right? Like, you can analyze, why is this happening? Let's try something else. Let's see what the metrics do. Like, we're very, not black and white, but like, we're in that realm of let the data drive the decision. And I think that we forget that scares people sometimes,
Yeah.
right? Because the
Mhm.
fact of the matter is sometimes the data says this is the wrong direction.
And
And
you're
that's not a personal
No one
thing.
likes to be wrong.
It just means we have to shift in a different direction, right?
correct. And
So
I think people are nervous. I mean, there's a whole level, and so Simon Sinek, which I talk about a lot because he's got some really good insights. One thing he says is, if you think about companies and what you're trying to do and how you're trying to be productive, a lot of companies play the finite game, and this is his infinite game kind of a book that he's read about, and I think it really resonates with me, right? I think sometimes we think companies, and so a couple comments here that while you were talking, said that I think resonated with me. One is companies make goals. Are we working on things that align with the larger company goals? That is a very good question to ask.
Mhm.
But one of the questions I think that when I was in a large Fortune 100 company was there was a whole bunch of goals around revenue projections because the shareholders were expecting certain levels of revenue. And so, yes, that is very much important. And yes, you want to hit those targets, but sometimes those targets are made unreasonably high. And then, in order for you to actually get those high level revenue goals, you're actually, in the short term, hurting the organization because you're cutting out things that you need to be doing for a long term vision and sustainability of the company. And so, I feel like what Simon Sinek says about this infinite game is businesses don't play. If you play basketball, it's a finite game. It has rules, it has a start and an end, and there's a clear winner at the end. I feel like in business, there is no winners. Like, there are people who make money and people who don't make money. There are companies that can stay around for a long time, and there are companies that don't. And when you start focusing on these short term goals of like this quarter's revenue goals or these things, that are short-term related, you start making short-term decisions, which sometimes hurts you in the long term to play the game longer than that. There are no rules in business. Well, there are rules in business, but there's like, it's not a defined set of rules. The rules change. Your competitors change. What products that are out in the market. Some days your market product is ahead of everyone else's and you're the top dog. Sometimes someone comes in with a disruptive technology and obliterates what you've been doing. And you have to sit back and say, can we even rethink? Have we invested too much money in the direction we're going? Can we even rethink ourselves or reinvent ourselves to compete with these new products coming in? Anyways,
Yeah.
a lot going on there. A lot
Well,
going on
let
there.
me let me take the idea of the definitions that we're talking about, and
Yeah,
then
sure.
take it on a micro level. And I think where the problems kind of
Love it.
occur.
Let's go there.
So, so you said like goals, a company goals, right? And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people get these two terms confused:
Okay.
goals and KPIs.
Sure.
So, like when we say revenue, revenue is not really a KPI, or like if you're saying we need to make 100 million in revenue,
Sure.
that's not a KPI. That's a goal.
I would agree.
And I think a lot of times these lofty goals that we can't see numbers, or you can call the goals also like an OKR, but a KPI, and I think a lot of us forget this, it's a key performance indicator. What is it indicating? It's indicating if you are reaching your goal. So every KPI needs to be set towards a certain goal. It's not the end goal. The KPI is never the end. Like if you do your KPI, then you're done. You've completed it.
That's a good
Your
point.
KPI,
I like
your
that.
KPI is your KPI is literally setting yourself up saying, are we on the right track to meet the goal? So to speak, are we staying? Are the goal is can we keep playing in the game?
Yep.
The KPI is telling you all those things to say we're on the right direction to stay in the game.
Yes.
And then you have metrics.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of if we think about our definitions, when we say, hey, what are your KPIs? Well, what's your goal first? And then we can develop the KPIs that are indicated.
I like that. There's
Analogy, yeah.
There's certain things that are hard to measure, right? Financial things are very easy to measure.
Right.
Quality potentially is easier to manage because you can put people in place that know
Right.
quality on products is a very well-defined subject matter.
Right.
How do you define employee satisfaction? How do you define the right product at the right place and time? There are other metrics that I think that are important to businesses, and I think this is kind of to what Microsoft was saying in their article here is um, they had to really sit back and step back and say, okay, what are these 35 key performance indicators that help us know if we are on the way to meet some of our goals?
So I'll do the most basic analogy in the world. Baseball, the goal is to win a
It's always got to
baseball
be
game.
baseball, doesn't it?
One win. It makes it easy at this point, right? So your goal is to win a baseball game. Your KPIs are how many runs did you score? How many runs did you give again? Did score against you? What's your ERA? So that's your KPIs. That's what you're focusing on for your end goal.
Sure.
And your other metrics are et cetera. So now what I want to do is take it on the micro level on, we talked about like the lofty company goals, but what usually happens for us from the BI team is we get a request in and it's usually has nothing to do with goals or nothing to do with KPIs.
Yeah. Can you give me this table of data? I need all the marketing history for all time for the last 6 years.
Right. Yeah.
Just give it to me in a table. And you're like,
We need to,
we're not
yeah,
even
we
talking
need to
about
see
goals
what-
or
yeah.
KPIs or insights or anything. Like we're missing what you really need. Like, what are you trying to do?
Right.
Yeah.
We need to see how Asia's performing. Can we create an Asia sales rep report? Can we,
Yeah.
can we do, what are our sales numbers year to date versus previous year? We
Sure.
can do that.
Yeah.
And we usually develop that. But the problem is if you like, you're usually, we're always usually a problem when we publish a report. But if you actually look at that report and see what it's actually displaying, it's like, okay, bar chart year to date versus previous year. Great. But again, what action are you going to be taking from this? And again, there's nothing to say benchmarking besides year to date's usually something good if you have nothing.
Yeah.
But for the most part, when you're just showing historical numbers without any benchmark or any achievement or something to achieve for, it becomes a static report and it becomes something that from a user point of view, especially, like what are they going to take from that?
So this
So
is
I think
go ahead.
you bring a good point, right? Which is what I glean from your description, Tommy, is I think as report individuals, as people who build reports, like we get requirements a lot of the
Right.
time, where we understand like, hey, we're talking to the business and this is what they want. This discussion, I think, warrants a slightly different approach that
Mhm.
people need to be aware of, which is you need to figure out what these calculations are, right? From a very high level, right? Call it the goals. We want to start measuring towards that goal. What sort of calculations like do we need to produce a metric that's going to tell us whether or not we're up down in a certain time period? And I think that that is a stretch, or a thing that's
Hmm.
new for our discussion, from the standpoint that you start with that very we call it like pseudocode, right? Like
Yep.
if you're in SQL and you're like, I want to do this thing, it's going to join by this. It's not the code itself. In the same way, those calculations kind of start off that way,
Right.
and then you figure out from there, do you actually have the data in your organization to track that,
Hmm.
or is one of these like new things that you want to track something that needs to be built from the ground up to start tracking that sort of information, so that you have the holistic realm of these metrics that allow you to understand whether or not the goal of the company is being reached? And I think that is a new thing that you started to
Right.
dovetail on. I just wanted to make a distinction that I
Yeah.
think that is a significantly different process than we're typically used to. This is one of those big kind of larger scale, from the top down, or from
Yeah.
a very open idea to trimming it down to like
Yeah.
the data itself.
Yeah. And you can even have departmental goals too. Like if you have
Mhm.
the product
Yeah.
team, it doesn't always have to, it should at least start somewhere from like the top from executive goal, but it could be very much like the product team, like they're launching a product. Okay. So what do you have any expectations on how the product's going to perform? Then we can start to develop our KPIs that way.
Yeah.
They actually have in the article. They actually have a really good like the SEO Score Card, and there's actually some really interesting visuals inside the article. So I would encourage you, if you haven't checked out the article, this will be in the chat window when it appears. It'll take a little bit for it to appear for those who are watching after the podcast has aired, about 24 hours or so. But check out the article that we put in the chat window, because it's actually really interesting what they're doing there. They have a lot of the very similar trending type charts. They're doing some key metrics. They're defining for every single KPI. They have a goal. There's a goal for everyone. Like we want to be at this number, and we're tracking towards that number or not. And there's again, like, this is one of the things I communicate with companies is, when you're building dashboards or you're building reports for things, you're always thinking, is it red? Is it green? Is it up or is it down? Like, those are the kind of things that we're trying to show here. And
Right.
so they have this dashboard. There's literally a dashboard with just little red dots and green dots across the page that are helping you indicate, okay, what areas should we be focusing our attention on? The green things I can ignore, move on. We're good there. And then things that are red, I need to go dig into it. And one of the things I would maybe add to this dashboard is how important are these? Like, not they're all important, but like, it's green or red, but obviously there are things in the red area that we need to focus on more so than others potentially. So I almost need like a ranked list of,
Yeah.
all right, let's go tackle these things now, and then start having put people around. Okay, we know this metrics is not meeting our needs. How do we get there? How are we gonna? Is our metrics wrong? Are we measuring the wrong thing? Or is our goal wrong? Or is this something we can feasibly meet?
I think there's a few levels or in the process of creating a report where we can step in and try to fetch, KPIs or goals. But I want to ask you guys if you were to take this in a chronological order, when we get the request in for a report,
Sure.
are there any methods or experience that you have that you would say the kind of fetch or begin to create some goals with the stakeholder or with the requester? At this stage in the process, if there is nothing at that point.
So I would say I use this term called insights. So whenever I'm having conversations around what do you want to build, I start talking about, well, let's not even talk about like, people come to me with
Mhm.
reports and say, I want this line chart. I think this would be cool. They go down to the details because they've already thought about it first, right? They've already
Yeah.
kind of contemplated like what they think would be relevant for what they want to use inside whatever report. I'm on the opinion of, well, yeah, we know that those might be where we end up eventually, but let's really step back. Let's talk about what desired behaviors do I want,
Mm.
and what are the insights that we're going after. Again, everything I kind of communicate is around action-based something. Say, tell me what you're trying to look for, right? And we talk about things about like, I want to know that my marketing campaign is driving more sales, right? So that's, we need to see my marketing spend is equating to increase in sales over time, and I want to know what kind of that ratio is. Or we want to see that revenue is increasing 5% this year versus last year, whatever that may be. There are certain things that we're saying, okay,
Right.
and then we start talking about, well, how do we get there? What do we know about how can we get to that number. And so it's like, well, it's controlling costs. It's, producing more things. It's selling more stuff. It's making sure that the supply chain is fully fed so that we're not, not producing parts. We're actually able to make things and actually produce and sell them. So we start having those kind of conversations. The insightful things, we don't even touch Power BI. We're just writing ideas down on a whiteboard essentially. And when we were in person, I used to do this like Post-it note thing. Put your insight down, put it on a wall. All ideas are good. We will not throw any ideas. Everyone in the room must contribute some ideas. And so at the end, we group them into topics. And then we say, okay, typically what bubbles out of that is a single group that is kind of like your KPIs. It's a mix of things. It's partly, it's cross business units. It's goals that are kind of larger. And so you have this page that's kind of like your overview page that kind of gives you a couple key performance indicators, maybe a chart, maybe a bar chart, just some high level information. And then you drill down into these different topics where, okay, now I'm going to drill into the financial realm. Now I'm going to drill into the marketing space. Now I'm going to drill into the manufacturing space. And so there's usually specific topic questions. There's a user page, something all about the users and how they're interacting and what they're doing, right? There's usually topics that make sense that lend themselves to naturally moving off of that overview page. That's what I've used. It seems to be fairly successful. And I know these things, but me as a consultant is to kind of get the client to think about this and walk them through a journey so they're comfortable with where we land at the end. So when they get the output of the report, they're like, yeah, this made sense. We talked about this. Like we kind of have to bring them through a journey to kind of get them to like buy into what we're saying and help them think through critically. They know what they want. They already do. They know the goals, they know the KPIs, they know how to get there. They just haven't articulated them, and that helps inform the report. So it's better used. I feel like. Seth, how do you do it?
No, very similar approach, and for those reasons, but other reasons as well, right? Like you're setting the groundwork for either many reports or a single report, right? But this is the base starting point for how we move forward. And I build a matrix off of that so that when we're 7 steps down the road and somebody throws the curveball of like, well, I wanted to see this. And you're like, no, we didn't, right? Like,
Yeah.
This is what we agreed on.
Yep.
This is why we went down this path. If we're all of a sudden gonna,
change
alter
direction,
one of these core things,
that's fine.
now we have to go this other path. But that's a huge change, right? It's the change management of a lot of these different things that I think is plagues some organizations, because you can every meeting is that same cyclical, like, well, why is this doing this? Well, it's based on a decision of like 5 steps up from somebody else, like in another meeting. Why are we doing this? Why is this doing this? Why? You need to have the places where people go, oh, this is why it is, right? Or I can say, we're not having this conversation. Here's the document. This is what tells you exactly why we're at where we are. When you understand it, let's have this conversation and move forward.
And you're talking about mitigating scope creep, because that's scope creep all day long, because someone new comes in.
Always have it.
And someone comes in new along and you're like, well, we want X, Y, Z. Yeah, that's fine, but that's out of scope for what we're talking about for this report. Let's get this report done. And again,
but it's also,
I think it's iterative. We want to get it. We got to get this thing done so we can say, did this work? And then we say, if this is not doing what we want, because based on our prior assumptions, right, we can always revamp, rebuild. I mean, this is the beauty, I think, of Power BI is you do the work to get the data model started. Well, now we've got other things that we can do to it to get other insights, other KPIs, other visuals. It's not hard to change those things. So we can continue to refine it. I've been on projects where we've been through, we've built a report 3 or 4 times, because the requirements are kind of like you don't know what you don't know. You build a report, it's in your face, and you're like, okay, this kind of worked, but man, it would be nice if I knew this, or if we had this extra data from here, that would make more sense. And so you spend a little bit more time. Clear objective. Exactly. So now you have a clearer vision of like what you can do. You now know it's possible, and then say, okay, we can enhance it more. So that I really love that agile process.
I want to highlight 2 things that you guys said that. Sorry. I'll let you go.
I just want to make one point on this one.
Sure.
Right? The reason I think that's very important to do, especially when where we started was very high level. I think we're in a mix of talking about report level or building this.
Sure.
Is if the power of bringing like dashboards like this to life is it aligns an organization towards the same goals. But you can't. You have to remember that you're people managing in here.
True.
Yeah.
as well.
Yep.
Not everybody is part of that build to get here,
Yep.
and you
Good
need
point.
the supporting things that they can come in at the base level and understand how you got to this point, so that they can be on that level.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to constantly have what we're talking about, which is the change management, or people not understanding why these were the metrics that were chosen.
Right.
So I'm saying,
Sure.
as you go along this path, it's really important to build for somebody else, behind that's going to come in new, that needs to understand the path, how you got onto this, company-wide objective, or what this dashboard means, because you need their buy-in as well.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's high level or report, same thing.
Tommy, your point?
That was it.
So I really want to put this point out there because, at least highlight these two things that you guys said. One is, Mike, you said, like, what are you trying to look for the insights? It's almost, you can follow that up with the question of, like, okay, what does success look like then? It's like, okay, what are your insights? Well, again, like, we're trying to increase our production line by 5, like, we want to increase this. Okay, so how would we measure success? What would we consider successful? Love that. The other thing, to your point, Seth, and it kind of goes along with this, is you have to be able to push back. Right. And that's maybe part of that adoption roadmap, where if you're at a company and you just get requests and you just have to do it, and let's say they just say, we want sales year to date, or we just want to see total sales. If there's no ability to push back to say, this does not align with anything, it's the old way of looking at the BI team, where you are just customer support and you just do what's requested of you. You're not going to find a lot of success, because you would have no ability to push back. You have no ability to say, this may not be a report that's providing business value, or to modify the request. Because there are some people out there who, they already have an idea what their report wants to look like without any insights, but it's their report and you're just supposed to build it.
Yeah.
And that kind of becomes some of the hard points too. I think so. That kind of all goes along with everything we've talked about now. It doesn't matter. This is where I would recommend for anyone listening, if you don't have people skills or this ability, no, but I mean, because it doesn't matter if you are the
Go borrow
most
some from
advanced
Tommy.
DAX.
Right.
No, not 10 years ago, that's for sure. So yeah, there's a lot of us, but what I would really recommend is
do a Toastmasters class. Go refine some of those communication things. Those are always very helpful, and I feel like the whatever they call it, I guess they call it emotional intelligence. I guess I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Those I think can get you out of a lot of problems, and as well as help you articulate challenges, issues well with other people. It's a podcast. Very good skill there.
The power of communication. There you go.
Seriously,
that's one of our new ones. We should talk
that's
what we need. Another podcast.
Yeah,
that's serious. Another podcast.
I might be a listener on that one. So, but there's an intertwined ability to be able to say, I might be able to do like a DAX measure and put it all in one step, and I can do all these amazing things in Power BI. But if I have no ability to translate a user's request and understand the business need,
understanding is good.
Yeah.
Empathizing with what they want to do.
Empathizing what they want, and then translating that. Okay, how
not emphasizing, empathizing. Like actually feeling their need to do. Compassion. I think that's compassion and empathizing with what they're trying to accomplish. Like to the point of like, I understand. One of the things that you can say, when you understand someone's argument, you can make their argument for them and they can agree with you. Right. So if you can understand their position so much so that you could go to somebody else, argue their position convincingly, and then have the person who told you the argument align with, that's exactly, like, now you understand what's bothering them.
The Latin translation of compassion, or the actual translation, literally translates into to suffer with, which I kind of love.
Yeah.
So anyway, but no, I love that. I love that.
Oh man, he's so cultured.
It's my wife.
Well, Tommy, you make a great point there, and I'd like to jump in with just a couple notes on, as we're not running down close yet, but getting close.
Oh no, we can't.
Some of the things that here I think is interesting is there's a whole section on challenges. Things that they face is from a challenge in doing this process. So there's like 3 bullet points that they point out, and I just kind of want to read through these with you guys. I think these are very relevant. I'd be curious your thoughts on them. one challenge was too many metrics.
Hmm.
And to summarize here, the team was tasked to go find metrics, come back with those metrics results, and they had 80 metrics. And they said, no, we need 35. 35 is the number we should be going from. So there, I think this is very common, right? You want to measure something and you come with too much. And you really have to be strategic about, no, this is not what we want. Let's be really core focused. We have to be hyper focused on what we're trying to accomplish here. And there you have to get rid of some metrics. So I think that was one challenge. Let me just talk about the second one and the third one here real quick. The maturity in metrics. So some of the metrics didn't use complete data sets, or they weren't being able to be updated as they wanted to be able to measure them, right? So they had a lot of what they called aspirational targets, but they need them to be realistic. So, I mean, yes, I want everyone in my company to have a purple unicorn. We can have aspirational targets, but is it realistically going to be able to happen? We have to be able to and I think this is the hard part of these metrics pieces. There were things you want to accomplish, like employee sentiment, very important for the culture of an organization, but how do you measure that? Like what kind of KPIs do you put in front of that actually gauge whether or not your employees are engaged and they're not running around the company trying to CYA, and instead they're actually promoting and doing work to kind of benefit the company. This is one of the things that Simon Sinek talks a lot about in his books, is if you're constantly trying to cover yourself with your metrics or whatever, your performance, that employee is spending 70% of their time working for you and the other 30% of their time trying to document, cover, collect metrics to keep themselves safe because they're worried about the retribution of the company. And when employees feel safe in a company, they're not doing that, and they can dedicate 100% of their time to just working. And if they fail, they fail. Or if they missed an objective, fine. But we communicate like, okay, well, how can I help you get better at getting to that thing that we want you to work on? And too many requirements overwhelm people. So whole nother stories there. I've been in companies where there's been like 100 objectives to meet, and I'm like, dude, ain't no way no one's doing 100 objectives. I'll pick 3 or 4 or maybe 5. Just give me the short list, and let's focus on those and make those winners. And then when we feel like we got those in place, let's add something different. And then the last point here was overcoming the reluctance to share and contribute. I feel like this is maybe not as much of an issue in younger generations. It may still be there, but I feel like there is a culture thing that has, I'm protecting what I know. The metrics that I do is for my department. I don't want, and maybe for an example here, right? If we start measuring production performance and we find out the quality team is just doing a horrible job, right? If we don't measure what they're doing and start looking at it, we can't know if they're doing a good job or not. And so when you start peeling back this is very revealing sometimes. We're peeling back things that people may not be happy with, but we have to be okay with that. And the culture of the company has to be like, look, we're doing this because we need to be better as a company. We're trying to spend our money more efficiently. So help us get to that point, because we'll equip you, we'll build it. You're part of the solution. You're not the problem.
Right.
I think you recapped, or I should say, maybe we should have started with the challenges, because we addressed all 3 of these, I think, pretty well in the podcast. To address like the last point real quick, I think where you find the most reluctance is where the perception of that business unit is a positive one, and the data is going to show negative things, right? Or things to work on. And there are certain areas where spin may work better in some cases than others. So I'll leave it at that. But I think for these 3 areas, these 3 areas, right? Too many metrics. The process you outlined, Mike. It exercises to take 100 metrics, put them on a wall, categorize them, figure out which one.
3 to 5 per page.
Like the goal of the meeting is to trim out 10.
Yep.
We meet again, and it gets harder and harder. Right?
It's hard
to get down to the point where these are things you can actually achieve. And in those meetings, we're addressing point 2, which is, do we have the data?
Yes.
Or is it something we need to build because we believe that these metrics are going to be super valuable for us to understand the goal? Now it's a business imperative that we go build these new things, right?
Yes.
But the first metrics we're going to see are those that are low-hanging fruit. It's the data we have. We just need to shape it or push it out in this new form. And then finally, like your other point, people management, right? Like
Mm.
in
Yeah.
order, like you need in order to bring, and actually, like I think this correlates. In order to bring business units on, you need the same things. Like I think I talked about, which is walk them through the process. Why are you building the KPIs that you are? What are the goals of the company? How is this going to help the company as a whole to get those business units on like in line? That this is not a you're going to get fired if this metric goes red. It's what are we doing in this area that is like making that downturn. Like we need to make a pivot, right?
Yep.
But if you don't have visibility into these key things that are going to drive whether or not you achieve your goals, then you can't pivot, right? I talk to my people all the time. Like failure to me is not missing a deadline or not producing something. Failure is you took it to the 11th hour and then said you're not going to make it. I can't do anything with that. The
Yep.
same with the business. You can't do anything with that. But if you're 60% of the way there and you realize that, oh my goodness, what we're trying is not working, or in the case of report writing, oh my goodness, like I just ran into something I need help, that's where the business can make decisions and pivot, right? It's communicating those things, and these dashboards help the organization understand, did we just launch a new initiative that's a total flop and we're losing 20%? Right?
Yep.
You don't know that
Right.
if the business unit that's working on that is like, oh my goodness, we're down 20%. Now we got to make it up. We have to shift and do something. And they're trying to fix it in their microcosm. And then by the time November comes around and December's the deadline, they haven't come around, and you're in this cycle of destruction that the business doesn't know. And then it's like the 11th hour, and the
Yep.
business just goes, what do you
Yeah.
mean you're not going to hit this number? You said you were going to hit the number. Well,
There's
back
no
in
communication.
March, you know, the idea of projection and things like we were doing wasn't working. Why didn't you tell us then? Right?
Yep.
Like this is where that dashboard just been like, hey, what's going on right here?
Yeah.
It's not a criticism of like, hey, we make bad decisions or we go down the wrong path. It's pivoting and adjusting so that we course correct in a faster manner than letting it ride until nothing can be done.
Yeah, I like
And
that.
this is
That's where
all
people lose jobs. That's where
yeah.
that's where you should fear. Is like
And this
it's
is
not
very
the
yeah.
downturn. That's where you go, hey, we've got a problem here. We recognize it. And these sort of like dashboards and KPIs and these metrics should highlight like something's wrong. We're like we need to
We're not
figure
gonna
out,
make it.
like,
Yeah.
marshal the resources over here
Yep.
to figure out how to course correct so that we can still hit our yearly goal.
I
Or
love that
5-year
these
goal or 10-year goal.
that's in a sense what a perfect to me, like a perfect dashboard KPI is, because let's say you had the product A team and they don't meet their goals that you developed. Well, that doesn't mean the product A team is just not good employees. Maybe they didn't have the same training.
Mhm.
Maybe they didn't have the same resources available. You could look at compare it with another product team that did well. Do we have the same number of staff on them? You can actually compare to say what was successful. Did this team have all that things to be set up for success? So, but it also goes very much to culture too, where you actually have someone like you or someone on the executive team that says, even if it fails, that's not failure. As
yeah.
long as you have that conversation and you can develop that in a dashboard.
I feel like there's a lot of sentiment around like to me this can be driven a lot of different ways, but having that executive sponsor that
Right.
understands this and is able to drive for these types of things isn't very important. That can
Right.
pitch for the business like we have problems here. We need to address these things. And so I think this is a good transition point to kind of talk
Yeah.
about just the next section and our document was around the benefits. They talk about 3 kind of key benefits. The benefits of doing this kind of stuff is cost and savings, cost and time savings. You now know, we're not spending a bunch of time, to Seth's point, we're not running around putting out fires. We're actually able to be a little bit more proactive and see things coming. Rapid quality improvements. So they're using their dashboard metrics to give leadership the visibility into their business and how they track against their objectives. That's a good one, I thought. And then reducing outstanding issues. That was the one that resonated with me because there typically is these long-running problems that no one's willing to address, and without these kind of higher level KPIs and high level designations around what's going on, these long outstanding problems don't get resolved. This provides a whole level of transparency that's needed, I think, inside organizations. And again, it's not easy. It's hard. You have to build a culture around this.
Yeah. So let me ask, and kind of end, but just from now actually using your Power BI skills, let's say, and this includes existing reports or reports that really don't have the benchmark requirements. Is there a way? I think it's either is there a way or have you found ways to take an existing report that maybe had no benchmarks and try to create some insights around it or use visuals, use the data, use DAX to actually show something that can be like a performance indicator?
So I would say if there's a report so it depends, right?
Yeah,
Reports that I'm creating, I'm at least trying to put a lens of like what are some of
right.
the metrics, what are some of the objectives of this. And so one of the things I communicate when I'm building stuff is um, how is this report driving action? What is the and I'll ask that question. What actions are we trying to drive? So if a report's given to me and they're like, here's my report, usually my questions are, okay, this is pretty, and you can explain to me what the KPIs mean on the page, but can you tell me what are the actions we need to do here?
Mhm.
What do we want to what the user of this report? What should they produce?
Right.
What do we want them to decide on? Is it decide A or B, or build more? No, don't build more. Like what are we trying to do? And so I usually drive down to the actions, and then once we talk about the actions of the report, sometimes the tables go away or the
Yeah.
tables move to page 2, and we start talking about trending of things, and we start talking about, you know, green light, red light, and we if it's a trend, it's showing, do we put a line to show it's going up or down? So those are the kind of things that we're looking for here. And so this is where I'll lean on a lot of my Delta training, Delta Bronze
Mm. Yeah.
Associates, which I think is really, again, I'll throw it out there again, amazing group of people,
Right.
really heavy around category management type things, but again, it very applicable to any kind of business in reality. But it's a lot about what's your position and what's your direction. The position is how many, what's my dollar in sales, and I'm in increasing or decreasing between
Right.
some sort of metric over time, right? So
Right.
that I'll look up a lot and we'll say, okay, what is the right metric we're talking about? Sales, performance, uptime, availability,
Yeah.
whatever the metric is, right? We talk about what those things are, and then we say, okay, we need to communicate where we're at right now and what direction we're going, and
Right.
is the direction we're going the right direction?
Right. That no, I love the Delta training. I haven't done it yet, but I that is on my bucket list, so to speak, my near term, short term bucket list.
I would highly
But
recommend it. It's
yeah,
definitely worth its weight. It is a time
yeah,
commitment, but I definitely feel like it's shaped a lot of
right,
my perspective on how I
right,
think about analytics. And
yeah,
I mean, just because you have a lot of data, it doesn't necessarily mean, like, if you're ever showing so in some cases, I mean, they do a great job at this. If you're showing a bar chart of categories of anything, that shows you only part of the story. Those are just
hmm,
positional things. And so having the bar chart, and so this is where the also, again, this plays very well into the international business standards,
yeah,
communication standards, IBCS, another great resource. But it talks a lot about, like, they're showing bar charts, but there's two bars, one for this year, one for last year, and showing you
right,
comparison up or down, so I can see what the gaps are, things are
yeah.
doing, and how I'm doing it over time.
So I'll give an example of kind of the question that I posed, and I call these insightful hacks, where if there really is some existing reports out there or just some existing pages where there's really no, in a sense, definite insight, what we'll commonly do is do a 3 month, 6 month, and 12 month rolling average
Hmm.
or rolling sales and compare that with the previous period to at least give them some idea of where they're trending. Because again, year to date's usually helpful, but that's hard when you're in September, which we are now.
Yeah.
That does not change as much day to day. So giving them a short term change, a middle term change, and a long term change to say, are we trending in the right direction for these categories we know they're important? That's something that will add to a report that really has no, in a sense, objective, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah. Exactly.
So
Seth, any thoughts from your side around kind of like the last pieces here, kind of around how you handle these, um, you know, closing thoughts, or how do you handle action? How do you drive action for these reports when you have reports that don't really drive action?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I think we went into like the report level first,
yeah,
like where the context of this conversation is. If can you drive bottom up KPIs?
mm,
No,
yeah,
you're kind of prepping whether or not the metrics chosen are ready, right, fit for
Sure.
purpose, kind of thing
yeah,
for the overall company.
Yeah.
Um, Does that mean that there aren't certain business unit goals or things that you want to track? No, absolutely. But when you go through the larger exercise as an
Hmm.
organization, everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
And to Tommy, your point before, pushing back or whatever, like if the company directive is we don't build a report, or 80% of the time of the BI team or whatever should be spent towards building reports that support these KPIs and the goals, and somebody comes in with a business unit only request, that's fine, but
Sure.
that gets 20% of the time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
you still need to drive, like, what are the insights? How is this helping you? Like, all those are valid conversations, but it's the alignment, I think, that, I would push forth in this conversation, where that is a top down. It is,
Yeah.
you drive that down to understand which metrics to build versus,
Yep.
kind of on the way up. Does that
Yeah.
mean they're not valuable? No.
Yeah.
Right. And they could become part of the conversation.
Yep.
But I just that's my
You
view
know,
on
I
it.
In the
actually
mic
really like
in the
that because
Microsoft
it's like true
article,
success.
yeah. So I think there's also like you're cherry picking some
Yeah.
of the best metrics to put towards the top, right? But in Microsoft's article, they talk about moving forward. What's the next steps? And they're talking about a whole nother tier, like a level 2 dashboarding, right? So
Yeah.
Mm.
now it's like more department specific, and so like, yeah, we can't capture all 80 metrics. We can only capture 35 of the key ones we're looking for across all departments. But when we look at level 2, that's where you start taking, okay, then now it's department. Let's focus on this group, and now, yeah, maybe you have enough there. Now you can incorporate some of those lower level or those bottom up metrics that help you
Yeah.
run the business unit.
Yeah.
I think too, I mean, the thing about this is not a one and done, right?
Yeah.
Fully.
It's iterative.
Yes.
One, you can start building it fast because your priority ones, or the things that you have data for, you can start rolling out, right?
Yeah.
But think about this from a business perspective, or even report, right?
Mhm.
When you have this type of organization, you go through this process, everybody's aligned, and then you have this thing that people can refine and think about, and like all that's going to do is spur what I think the article is saying is, do we take some of these other secondary metrics, or because we have this alignment across the organization and everybody's thinking about this in the same way,
Yeah.
here's some other insights or things you didn't consider, or data that is available. And that's where I think that secondary or the revision comes in, because now you've aligned everybody's thoughts around the things that are important, and people can start to gauge and shift their focus on the long game, Mike, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yep.
if the goal is, if everybody's objective is the goal, like, failing in quotes or not making the right decision is okay, and you build a culture of what I would say is part of a data culture,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
security in what we're doing, because we know that it's okay to, like, not make the right decision. We'll course correct as an organization if we need to, right? It
Yep.
was the wrong organizational decision, right? And I think that's where we love data. Like, when we're presented, you're aligning all of these things together, and the more you do that on higher and higher levels, the more buy-in you get from everybody thinking about the same problems in the same ways, or bringing new ideas into the flux
Right.
of things.
I like that. I think that's
I
good.
love that.
I think that's a
So-
good. I think that's a good wrap up. So we want to say thank you for everyone who listens to the podcast. We appreciate it. We have a lot of fun on here, as you can tell. We laugh, tease each other quite hard. So that's we're buddies, we're friends. But we're MVPs, and we're also having fun in this space. We love the Power BI Arena. It is a amazing tool. For lack of a better term and coin the phrase, it's a game changer for us. We've used it. We've centered our careers around it. And so we hope that you're finding the same benefits as well with this really amazing tool, and maybe you gain some insights here from us, how to use it better, how to think about these things. So with that, if you had fun, if you laughed at this podcast, if you argued with us on the podcast while you were walking around or listening to us, we appreciate it. But if you do us a favor, just share it with one other person. Go out to someone else and say, hey, I found this cool podcast. It's kind of interesting. Maybe check it out. And so if you wouldn't mind, just share that. That's all we ask. And we'll keep producing more content. And Tommy, where can we find the podcast?
So if you're watching the podcast right now, you can listen anywhere a podcast is available. If you're listening to the podcast, you can watch it anywhere video is available.
Yep.
We stream 7:30 Tuesdays and Thursdays in the morning Central Time, so you can join the conversation. We do the live chat.
Yep.
Or again, subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, so you can do it on your runs, when you're working, when you're eating lunch.
When you're tired,
So,
you want to go to
and
bed. You
when
need
you're
something to
tired, go to
drone you
bed,
to
just
sleep.
drift
Yeah,
apart.
drift yourself to sleep to the podcast. So
Right.
we appreciate the community. We thank you guys. You're so much fun to be a part of. And we'll see you guys next week.